All right. Hi, everyone. I'm glad to see you all here in our final session of the day. Thanks for being here and sticking with us through the whole day. It's a lot of fun. We are going to be talking today with three people who I just admire greatly in the local foods community of Kansas. We're going to talk about meeting people where they are. So our speakers are Donna McClish, Rick McNary, and Rosanna Bauman. We're going to start off. Rick is going to start us off, and then we will move through to the others.
Oh, thank you, Joanna. Remind me, do I do the slide presentation now? Okay. Well, it's appropriate this is titled Meeting People Where They Are because I happen to be suddenly having to travel today, so I'm sitting in my truck. Anyway, I'll share my screen now to talk about kind of my background. So it was a year ago on April 28th in an evening, my wife and I had just finished a great dinner of beef we'd purchased from a local ranch couple in Anthony, Kansas, Craig and Katie Carruthers. And my wife informed me that the grocery store was empty that day. And I thought, well, that of beef and meat products. And I thought, well, that's odd. We just had some of the best beef I've ever eaten. And so I thought, well, how can I connect people I know with people like the Carruthers who I knew sold product direct to consumers? So I jumped on, grabbed my laptop, sitting there watching a Hallmark movie with my wife, and began Shop Kansas Farms. I've learned a long time ago, you name things what they are, and I wanted people to shop Kansas Farms. And I invited my friends and a few family members to join the group. It was at 6:58 in the evening. At 10 o'clock that night, I checked it, and there had been 400 people that had joined. I made it public, and so that others joined in real quick. By the next evening, there were 5,000, and currently there are 147,000 members that have joined. Uh, a large part of what I've done in all my life, or the last 20 years of my life, has been involved with food security, especially internationally, around the hunger issue. It was 20 years ago that I met a 5-year-old girl in Nicaragua that crawled up in my arms and asked me to feed her because she was hungry. So I've spent the last 20 years really trying to understand and trying to help and provide both relief, the give a man a fish, and development, the teach a man to fish, solutions to the most impoverished people of the world. So about 10 years ago, I really began researching and was at a Kansas Rural Center conference I attended and heard the comment about our average calorie travels 1,500 miles to our plate. I started learning about local and regional food systems, and I got incredibly interested. Spent a lot of time at K-State. Dan nagging gas here every time I could get a chance, and really began to try to understand and watch what had happened and what it would take to make it happen with me. I live in Potwin, Kansas, near El Dorado and Newton and Wichita area. And what I saw was something that was needed all along, was some kind of a digital hub that would really connect people together, because we're living in a digital society. And so when I started the Shop Kansas Farms that night, I didn't know what it was going to do. I just wanted a few friends to show up and buy meat from my friends and families that sold this. As it continued to grow, in fact, in the third day of it, I realized this was actually a very integral part of the food system that I'd seen. Didn't know how to make it happen, but it was just happening, to use a term in our sphere, organically. As consumers were driving to look for food for themselves. One of the things I love best is that Kansas farmers call them public fears. I've been around food security, and hungry people are usually poor people. And so when you think of food insecurity, you usually think of people who are impoverished. But really, what happened at the beginning of COVID, with the grocery stores being emptied and the supply chains being broken, was a new type of food insecurity for Americans. People who had money couldn't find it. It wasn't there. And of course, with Maslow's hierarchy of need, food and hunger is right there at the top. And so people were fearful. That's what really initially drove this, as people were looking. And I love it that Kansas farmers call them public fears. And what I saw being built in that was a regional food system with agriculture, but it was connected with a digital hub. One of the things I've loved about it all, and we've got some facts behind this too, done some research on rural revitalization taking place with a new type of economy, as people were, uh, even at the time, willing to drive, maybe doing pickup deliveries on a porch or drop off deliveries, but people were anxious to get out and about and go find the farmers. And I believe that this type of economy is critical to rural revitalization. Here's what I love best: a local and regional community was being built around agriculture. I began to really understand the importance of farmers in the hunger space about 5 years ago, when I was in I was in an FFA conference and had been invited to one, never been to one before, and it was a huge gathering back in Louisville. And as I said later, I've met 65,000 of my new heroes, but I kept hearing them say in this thing, they need to tell their story better. And so I began to, I offered to Kansas Farm Bureau at the time, I like to write. I said, hey, I'll write some feature stories. So as I began to write about Kansas farmers and ranchers, I really began to understand how they think about community, how they're connected with community, even though they're 2% of our population, and how that they are such a vital part of feeding the world, of course. It's one of those things that I should have known that, but I really began to understand the value of that. One of the things I've loved about Shop Kansas Farms is that education happened. One of the admins right off the bat was Megan Kramer, the director of communications for Kansas Farm Bureau, who said she spent 14 years trying to make this type of education happen. And it was just happening organically as farmers were saying, hey, I've got a quarter of beef I'll sell you. And they were, and consumers were like, well, what's a quarter of a beef? And what do you mean hanging weight? And how does this whole process work? And so farmers learned to talk to consumers in consumer languages or consumer language. Consumers also learned a lot about farmer speak, not only with beef products, but with a variety of things. One of the things, of course, we know people want to shop local. That's been intensified, especially in the last year. This is a movement. These are states that have picked up our model. They write us and say, hey, we want to start this in our own state. They might call it something different, but they used our rules. They used all of our processes. And we said, yeah, go for it. Just do whatever you want. One of the things I love about it, the farmer voice has a new communication platform. You know, I've been watching this whole know your food, know your farmer, and how you communicate to the consumers for years, and see some incredibly wonderful things going on. But I don't know that I've ever seen a whole bunch of consumers run to farmers and say, hey, I want to buy something from you, but you got to explain it to me first. That's been one of the most valuable things that have come out of this. Another thing we've learned, it's really been hard for us to stay focused on the purpose. I learned real quickly, we started with one rule: be nice. It's kind of like kindergarten: be nice and share, or else you'll get put in timeout. 2 days into it, I actually had to throw the first person out. I had to block them because they just made nasty political rants about me. And I'm not a political person, but they made, of course, the upcoming election at that time and accusations. And it's like, no. And I warned them, and they're like, intensified it. And so I learned that you can actually block people. And through the time, we've had to really stay focused on our purpose is to connect people, consumers, to farmers so they can buy directly. That's all we're there for. We're not there to sell farm equipment. We certainly can't sell live animals. We're there for the direct consumer transaction. One of the questions we get is, will this continue after the COVID-19 crisis? We already see that it is, because what happened during this year is that Shop Kansas Farms brought farmers and producers and growers and makers a whole new raft of clientele. And I've encouraged the farmers all along, especially those who were not accustomed to selling to consumers, is you've got customers coming to you. Now you need to really intensify your customer relations, because that's what's going to keep them coming to you after this. Because corporations spend, and nonprofits, millions of dollars trying to craft a narrative around a product. And there's 146,000 narratives in this now. One of the things that people have asked us for along the way was a map. And can we have a map? And so Facebook and Google don't play well together. We couldn't make it happen without creating a separate website. So my wife and I considered it and decided we're going to make Shop Kansas Farms an LLC. We'll invest our own money into a website. So right now, that's all the website really is. Last week, we hit more than 700 farmers and ranchers and producers and makers who have listed their businesses on that map. And it's free, and it will be free in perpetuity. We've got some great stuff in the works to actually help farmers sell better and more, and consumers to buy easier. Those have been the three big gaps that we've seen, and we've tried to fill through the website. One is a map, a searchable directory. The second one is farmers who are selling to consumers for the first time have some challenges of making that happen and knowing how to market, how to brand. Consumers, conversely, are sometimes having a difficult time buying from farmers. Within the next 2 months, you'll see our website's going to really fill out, and there's a brand new opportunity for that to be a lot easier so farmers can make money. At the end of the day, one of our guiding principles inside has always been to prosper farmers, to protect farmers, and to give consumers access to locally sourced nutritious food. And I'll stop sharing. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Rick. Okay, well, let's move on. And Donna, would you like to tell us a bit about what you have going on?
Mute. There we go.
There you go.
We're going to share the screen.
Great.
Let me see here. Let me pull this down.
And while Donna's getting organized, I might mention if we'll have questions for everybody at the end, but if you think of a good burning question right now, you can pop it in the chat and they'll stay there, and then we'll get to them when everybody's done.
Can you see my screen?
Right. I can.
All righty. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Donna Pearson McClish with Common Ground Producers and Growers. We are a urban farm, mobile food hub, and mobile market. We grow and move food, basically. And during this pandemic, as I was listening to Rick, we have moved lots of food for people that have been food insecure, and because the food system has been very unstable, which we were just delighted and blessed to do. That's what we do. So Common Ground kinds of focuses on three things. We've previously done the urban farming, expanding our network of growers, growing and moving food. And on the left side of the picture, you see us set up in one of our community rooms of our senior centers. And on the right side, you see us set up in front of one of our senior residences. So that's what we do. We take the food and produce to our senior residences. We normally serve 35 2 times a month in regular times. And you see the people lined up, and we go to their doors, set up outside. They come outside, use their senior market vouchers, their cash, their SNAP EBT cards, which we use to double up food bucks. And usually there's a line that's waiting for us, and we cannot be late. They let us know that. But usually there's a line that's formed, and we go and set up about 30, 45 minutes to an hour. We take down everything, reload it in the truck, and we go to our next stop, which we do 4 or 5 of those per day. The next thing we do, concentrate on, is intergenerational farming, community youth involvement, and we hire people from our community to work with the mobile market. On your left down at the bottom is my brother and grandchildren working, and we were planting They were planting something. And so we are a family farm, family urban farm in Wichita for over 50 years. And so our urban farming and link to the community is vitally important to us. Then lastly, we are now connecting with socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers and looking to provide educational and technical assistance. This is a big paradigm shift in farming right now. And so we thought we would fit very well in helping socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers to know what's out there, what's available to them, how they can access it, and all of that. So we are in a prime position to be a catalyst to help those farmers become, especially beginning farmers and farmers and ranchers that are socially disadvantaged, to provide educational, technical assistance, a listening ear, and help in getting their farms together and linking them to resources. So that's kind of what we do. We're common ground producers and growers. We have a mobile farmers market and mobile food hub. You'll see us everywhere, and all are fed and no one is hungry is our motto. So we live up to that motto. Some of you may have seen us on Facebook when Highland Dairy said that they had thousands of crates of milk. So during the pandemic, we moved about 25,000 half pints of milk to the community, it was cold, it was hard work, but it was really, really exciting. So I get excited about things like that. So anyway, that's Common Ground. I'm Donna, and I'm sure if you have any questions, we'll be here to answer your questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Donna. Okay, Rosanna, you are up.
Okay. Whoop. Oh, wow. That's all just a shadow, isn't it? I better adjust that. All right. Yeah, I am. I did. This was a really crazy week here at the farm. Otherwise, I had probably uploaded some really pretty pictures and everything to go along. I'm Rosanna Bauman, and our family we started our beginning farm from scratch. This is actually our 20th anniversary this spring. So we still feel like beginning farmers, but I guess by the books now it's not. But every year feels like we're learning all over again, everything that we learned from the last time. So we didn't come from we didn't have any inherited land. We didn't really grow up farming anything like that. So we were just wanted to always wanted to just kind of get back to the land, that idea. So everything started with a interest in agriculture, and because of my family's involvement, that's my parents and my 5 siblings. I have 4 brothers and 1 sister, and everyone is still actively involved on the farm. But because of the multiple family members, we sort of self-diversified. So as we seen a need around the farm, we addressed it with whoever's interest group, and then it kind of grew. Anything that we discovered was a need on our farm, we also discovered was a need for the community. So everything has a community aspect from that end. So we started out selling local foods. Chicken was our flagship product. We had raised chickens on a small scale prior to that, just a little backyard flock. So we started with that, started processing in 2001, and we needed state inspection. And with that grew out, we became inspected in 2007. So once we gained that for our animals, we offered the inspected processing services for others. So our family's initial drive was, just to be able to find products. We knew that the regular corn and grain farmers that we could see around us were barely making a profit. So we were looking at direct to consumer agriculture, purely from a reason that if that's not working, maybe this will. And that direct to consumer agriculture that we started with through all of our diversity is still our flagship farm product. What's interesting and this is kind of the theme of this talk, is how our farm and our methods of marketing has changed over the years. So this, our newest farm rendition probably is our mobile meat market. And that was, as our family grew older, we started migrating away from wholesale. We did a lot of wholesale sales previously because we were all young, we were going to school, we needed to be able to just move a lot of product in a very little time frame. And we started getting frustrated with the wholesale model and realized that we now had the manpower and the drivers and stuff to be able to do a little different model. We started looking at what we didn't like about farmers markets and looked for an alternative. And that's where the mobile meat market was sort of born out of a discussion with our frustration with wholesales and our frustration with, trying to sell ugly frozen packages at a farmer's market when everyone else is selling very attractive vegetables and stuff. And that was mainly, it was a intentional move, and that kind of links up with some of what I heard John Eichert talking earlier, as far as he was saying, just do what fits you and do what you're supposed to do. And that was really the driving force with our family developing the mobile meat market. Is we knew we were frustrated with greenwashing. We knew we wanted to meet customers face to face, and we knew we wanted to stay true to our values. And for us, that was, we didn't want to do interstate shipping just because it didn't fit us. It wasn't something we wanted to touch. We knew that we didn't really want to do meat sales online, back to the interstate shipping thing, for the same idea. That wasn't our business model. That wasn't what we did. And so it was back to, we focused on who we were and we developed something. And it felt really, especially, and this was 5 years ago, it really felt like it was moving against the grain because of everything was moving to online meat sales. It was just picking up. This was prior to the pandemic. And so for us to go to farmers markets when everybody was leaving farmers markets at the scale that we were arriving in farmers markets seemed like a suicide mission. But the key thing was that we went at it in a manner that fit our farm. And interestingly enough, here as we moved last year, moving into the pandemic, and a lot of, we were focusing on the customer segment that didn't want to buy their meat online, that did want to handle it and roll it over in their hands and look at it before they committed to it, similar to what they did in the grocery store. And that was, definitely a smaller segment of the market, but it was our segment that we wanted to go after. And that availability, that particular market was not there in the early months, definitely, of the pandemic last year. And that's when we also had to change a little bit. And we never shipped meat. We still maintained that business philosophy, but we did give them the ability to pre-order. I think in Hoover there was an app too. There was a link to our pre-order shop, which was in its infancy, and we were lucky that we had just barely begun exploring and promoting that to our customers. I was really fortunate that we had already on our team Mercedes Taylor Puckett, which some of you know out there, and she was already helping us develop a shop to where people could order in advance. But that pairing to where people can order in advance for some of the specialty stuff, still arrive at market and be able to see their purchase prior to committing, has been a really good fit. And so it's a funny hybrid of dipping your toes a little bit into the online meat market, but not in the way that most of them are. And there's some, there'll be some pictures. I guess a little bit of detail maybe on what the mobile meat market is for us was we just essentially took an enclosed trailer, and I'm making this sound pretty simple, but we put glass case coolers. We treated it like a regular grocery meat counter. We put glass case coolers to where people can see. We have vacuum packed clear packaging to where they can see all sides of their meat prior to purchasing. Everybody is encouraged to ruffle through the goods and find what they want. So that's all that I have, Joanna.
All right, that's really great. Thank you so much, all three of you. I think we can start first and see if anybody has questions, and you can either put them in the chat, or if you just want to turn on your video and wave your hand or use the little raise hand feature at the bottom, that would be great.
No. He's our farmhand. He takes care of the cows.
All right, does anyone have and are people able to unmute themselves? Oh, okay, now, sorry about that. I think you should be able to unmute yourselves now. All right. Oh, sorry. Oh dear. All right. Does anyone have any questions? If not, I will start through. I have a few more questions. Oh, let's see here. We've got. Okay. Nope. Okay. Okay. So for the three of you, because we're kind of talking about meeting people where they are, and I know everybody's talked a little bit about how the pandemic has impacted things, but have you seen a big difference in where people are from the beginning of the pandemic to now?
Like to say that.
Well, for us, this is Donna with Common Ground. For us, yes, we have. We've seen the food system in its weakest, most vulnerable condition. And that when those systems break down, the people that are most vulnerable already suffer the most with those systems. So where we were originally seasonal, we've been delivering all year. We've been delivering fresh produce. And then in the wintertime, we went to the farmers, the families' food boxes. And now, because of the pandemic, and this is just my perspective, even though we may contain the virus, or we may at some point be able to move around and get back to some sense of normalcy, the effects of the pandemic are going to be long lasting. So we're going to have to support the food system until we begin to rebuild the food system where it's equitable. So I think we're going to be in this quite a while. And the food desert areas and the food insecurity areas are seeing more and more need for fresh produce, fresh, healthy food. So I think the administration recognizes that. And I think we're going to be giving out more and more food for a while, because we have to rebuild our system. We have to not rebuild our system, we have to repair it and then make it more equitable. So if we ever go into this again, then we won't have a system that's so vulnerable. And so many people that are vulnerable also.
Rick or Rosanna, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is Rick with Shop Kansas Farms. The pivot that I've seen, and something that's really encouraging to me, are the number of entrepreneurs that have come out of this. As people have realized there are opportunities for them to sell things they raise in their garden, eggs from their chicken, things that they have that, or are getting into becoming entrepreneurs in order to be able to sell. And again, it's back to the rural revitalization, as I'm seeing people pop up on the map, because when they list themselves, they're listing as a business because they're selling something.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, after 20 years in the hunger space, I've always said the best way to end hunger is to have a good job. And a good pay with that job. Now, that's not always possible. Excuse me, I had to shut my truck. It's not always possible. And so that's why, it compels us to provide relief solutions when necessary. But truly, the restoration of human dignity is exactly what Donna's after, what I'm after, what anyone in the space of working with hungry people and impoverished is, that restoration of human dignity. And so as I see entrepreneurs coming onto the scene now and people saying, there are business opportunities out there I never realized, to me, that's a shift. That's a new place people are. They weren't a year ago.
Mhm. That's really exciting. Yeah. Yeah. Rosanna, what about you? Where do you feel the people that you work with and sell food to have shifted quite a bit from the beginning of the pandemic until now?
That's a good question. So we had a lot of people, especially being in the meat industry, say, hey, you have a lot of new customers now. Are your customers buying and hoarding, all that? And that was really interesting because, one, I never felt like we had our customers hoarding. We didn't ever have customers coming and buying. They bought, maybe our regular customers would maybe buy a little bit more than normal, but not in any excessive amounts. The one thing I feel like, since I wasn't chasing, I expanded my local market somewhat, but I really feel like most of the customers that I gained, it was a sustainable growth. It wasn't, I didn't ship to people in New Jersey and California and stuff that I would never see again. If I was shipping meat nationally, I would have definitely had some of those customers. But I really feel like, obviously, we had word of mouth, folks telling theirs, like, well, I get my meat from here and they haven't ran out. And I really think that's why I never seen my customers hoarding. They knew I was the farmer and the butcher and the marketer. And so they knew that if there was meat to be had, that I would find a way to get it to them. They weren't thinking like, oh my goodness, it's here now, it might not be here tomorrow. So they wouldn't try to buy me out, sort of thing. And I really appreciated that. And I really contributed to the relationship that I had already started to develop with my customers, and the fact that I never continued to, I didn't market in any new areas or anything like that. So I really appreciate that for doing my planning this year.
Yeah. And Rosanna, do you process all of the meat that you sell?
Yeah, we do red meat and poultry and lamb and goat and beef and pork.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
everything from start to finish goes through our hands. So.
Okay. Yeah. And so that's really kind of a unique situation. I know that for other farmers, and we were included in this, more people wanted to buy meat from us, but we couldn't get a spot at the processors, and that has gone on and on. So yeah, that's a really, you guys had a very unique situation there. That's great.
I have never been more glad and more unhappy, both, to be a butcher than I was this past year.
Yeah.
There was definitely days, whatever, I got 400 calls each day in the early days of the pandemic. So like the stress level was just out the roof. It's when you tried to hide the fact that you were a butcher, because people would flag you down everywhere. But on the other hand, for the sake of my customers, the ones that had already, if you want to say, invested in me, committed to me, and trusted me to provide their family for food, I was never more glad that I could be the butcher. Up until this last year, if you want to say, I always, I never abused my position as a butcher. I stood in line and I took my turn at my butcher slots when they came. But when it got crazy, that was the first time that I ever decided to take advantage of the fact that I was the butcher, because I wouldn't have been able to serve my customers. So I thought, my goodness, I'm not going through all this stress of being a butcher for nothing. I am definitely going to make sure I butcher my own cows.
Right.
So
right.
That was the first time that I, if you'd want to say, took advantage of the fact that I owned the butcher shop. But
yeah,
it definitely came with its downsides.
Yes. Well, that's interesting. Okay, we have a question from Elizabeth Berger. She says, thank you to all the presenters. Kansas is so lucky to have such advocates and entrepreneurs. Question for each presenter: who or what are not yet engaged in this important conversation about stronger, more just, and sustainable food systems? Who would like to take a run at it?
This is Donna.
Okay.
Who or what are not yet engaged in this important conversation about stronger? From my experience, I will speak from my experience. There are people that are engaged in the conversation, but have no idea what the outcome of the conversation needs to be. Let me explain. We had a meeting several days ago and talking about extending the food boxes or some more food boxes coming in. There wasn't a lot, the interest was vague, as if people hadn't realized the intensity of the lack of food for some areas, even in our own city. So I think that the pandemic has been good for us on one side, that it's opened up the inequities of the systems in America. It's been bad because of the effect, but it has shown us where we are most vulnerable. So, and I think some people are just not comfortable with that, experiencing that, because now it says to us, we don't have a perfect union. We don't have a perfect society, but that's okay. We can work not to be perfect, but we can work to be equitable for everyone. And now that we have a new administration, I think things are changing significantly, where the present administration was not as involved as a stakeholder in helping those most vulnerable populations that we have. So a lot of people are becoming engaged, and a lot of people are learning their part in this paradigm shift. So we're going to give them an opportunity to learn and come along with us. For those that have our boots on the ground, we just have to be a little bit more gracious in allowing them to come to know what we already know. Like Rick said, the farmers are coming into their own with entrepreneurship. John Eichert said that we're going to have to do local farming to feed our families. And I firmly believe that's where we're going back to that. So we're just going to have to be able to bring those people that are not yet ready to be a part of all of this. So we can bring them along with us. And so everybody can pitch in where they fit in, and we can do what we got to do and make it a better system.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you, Donna. That's great. Rick or Rosanna, would you like to weigh in?
Go ahead, Rick. Did you have something?
I do. I've spent 20 years working with international and domestic hunger relief. And two of the most important concepts I learned early on was the difference between relief and development. I mentioned this earlier. Relief is giving a man a fish. Development is teaching a man to fish. And in my space in the last 20 years, what I've noticed is that those two groups are sometimes divided. Mm-hmm. That there are the nonprofits and the agencies that are focused on the food security and providing relief. And then over here on the development side is the business world, trying to create jobs and things. We've often said that, yeah, you have to give people a fish today because they're going to die if they don't have it. But we must always keep an eye on how do we get them on their feet and sustainable. Mm-hmm. And so what I've noticed, and I've been to hundreds of conferences around food security and international hunger and things of that nature in the last 20 years, what I've noticed absent in most places are business people.
Mhm.
Now, businesses are often tapped into to support, to be the underwriter or the sponsor or things of that nature. But I can point back to literally hundreds of events that I've been at, and I'll find booth after booth of agencies and nonprofits,
Mhm.
but I don't find anybody there hiring for their company.
Hmm.
And so I think that that connection. So, for example, I love Kansas State University, but their leadership compartment, which really works in the nonprofit world, and their business unit, they're two separate parts of the campus. I think they need to be together. I think that businesses and Robert Ager wrote the book Begging for a Change, and he says there's no such thing as a profit without a nonprofit. Nonprofits are incredibly huge, but that separation between the business world and the nonprofit world, I'd love to see somehow come together better in a way, because what I have seen missing is the business and the entrepreneurial opportunities. That's what I love so much about what I see happening on Shop Kansas Farms, are people jumping on this and making entrepreneurial things happen. So that's, to me, been a lacking part of the voice, and I see them coming on and stimulating that in whatever way we can is, I think, critical.
Very interesting. Thanks, Rick. Rosanna?
Yeah, that was interesting. Good point, Rick. I like that. That's been one thing that I felt has been missing from the conversation as well. But I would say, as far as people that are engaged versus not engaged, farmers, meat processors, and the USDA and farm ag groups recognized for years and years that there was insufficient, say, value-added processing in America for local foods, and that was a serious hindrance to the growth. I mean, this is nothing new. This is not new news to any of us in this room. And I'm talking, value-added processing. That's fruits, vegetables, meat, grains, everything. So that lack of access to processing, packaging, distribution, if you want to call it that, has been known. I really feel like this last year drew the consumers into that conversation. Like, we knew it in the room. Now everybody in America knows it. You would have had to been really hiding to miss that part of the story. And so that's really a positive thing about drawing them into the conversation, whereas previously most consumers who really cares about, the middle, they might have liked local foods, but having the anything to care about that middle step, whether we're talking about funding, whether we're talking about merely organizing, anything on that nature, has definitely been missing. But the one thing that I would say, now that the crisis is over, this is what I'm worried, and Rick may have seen, a little bit of it also through the Shop Kansas Farms. Now that the crisis is over, I don't want the consumers to think that the problem is solved, because this is where we actually get to work. This is, up until now, it was merely the stopgap, through 2020 up until now, it was just surviving. It was, giving people fish. Not in that sense, but you know what I'm saying there. And so now we really need to still maintain the consumer's interest in this, even though the crisis is over, and be able to keep that messaging up, that now is our time to be able to build up the local food system, so that we're not in those positions that we were in last year.
That's great. Really interesting. Okay, we have another question from Amanda Wagner. She says, I recognize myself, a consumer with an attraction to and higher consumption of products from agribusinesses that have a high degree of online storytelling, but also recognize that this is yet another hat for producers to wear. What are your thoughts on meeting consumers at that place? So, using your story to sell the product and the time associated with that. Who wants to jump in on that one?
Can you repeat that question again for me, please?
Yeah, so basically Amanda's said she recognizes in herself that she's attracted to the farm stories, the farmers who use a sort of the story to help sell the product. And she wonders, she recognizes also that that is yet another hat for the farmers to wear. It's probably sort of time consuming and that kind of thing. I hope I'm getting that right. And she was wondering your thoughts on on that issue. Is that about right, Amanda? You can jump in too. Okay.
Well, if I may jump in here, I've been pondering that same thing. And when I talk to farmers and what I hear from them and what I know of them, and after having written about them for the last 5 years, I know they're so darn busy from before sun up until after sundown. So the idea of telling their story, the idea of doing something is incredibly challenging and difficult for them. They're too busy. But what I remind them of, especially if they're going to get into the direct to consumer thing, is that people are more interested in your story than they are in your product. They want to know you. So you're selling your story. They can go to any box store and buy now what you have, but they're coming to you. And so, tell them who you are, sell who you are. You're why they're buying this now. Yes, they want the local, they want the nutritious, but truly just being who you are. And a lot of these farmers that I know personally, I say, who would not spend 5 minutes with Glenn Bronco, for example, and not fall madly in love with him? He's just a great, funny guy. And I'm going to want to buy stuff from him. I want to buy lamb from him, and I don't even eat lamb because I love Glenn Bronco. So what I encourage farmers is just be who you are, invite them to your farm if you can, and let them see what you do. Because that storytelling component, and another component in this is, as we look at the Shop Kansas farms, 146 of the 147,000 people are consumers. Well, there's still a lot of consumers not on that page, and there are a lot in Kansas. And so what we're doing with our website next is to work with an SEO company. It's the same SEO company that does Amazon Alexa's SEO, to draw the non-social media people to Kansas farmers to buy from them. So that helps tell that story.
That's great. Does anybody else have thoughts on that?
I would have some comments on that, definitely. I really like how you framed that, John, as far as they're more interested in you than your product, which I think as farmers, we all also need to bear in mind and realize that even when people are selling identical or nearly identical products as us, whether it's at the farmer's market in the store or whatever, it's not that. We have to realize that even if our production systems are identical, which in very rare cases they are, or breeds or whatever, nonetheless, we're still a different farmer, and we're all going to each appeal to another different subset of consumers, audience, whatever. The one thing that I would totally agree with the thing about it's another hat for a farmer to wear, and it's not a hat that I'm interested in wearing, if that makes sense. Like, I don't have time to be able to learn and to be an expert at all of the constantly changing marketing strategies. I mean, 20 years ago, you could learn marketing and it didn't change that much. But now what you said, the search engine optimization, what you post on this platform and that platform, and, how many times and all that. Some farmers, some people individually would be more interested in, and so then they'll obviously do a little bit better job. That's why I've partnered, outsourced most of my marketing. I that was a big step for me as a farmer, because it's kind of like paying for a bookkeeper, or paying for a marketer and a bookkeeper is kind of the same thing, because you can't see the value that they're producing. If you have somebody that you're paying to come and pick lettuce, you can see the value, you can calculate it, you can crunch it and see if it's worth your dollar to keep them. But so that was a big hump for me to get over. But when I realized that I was really injuring my whole business, not by not having them. I did, but having said that, I can't just go and hire a fancy PR firm. It's very critical that my voice still comes through in my marketing, that my farm's brand still comes through in my marketing. It's not the marketer's stamp. You know, I didn't hire the marketer because of their style. I did it because I need someone with those tools to be able to help tell my story. And so I think that's, don't be afraid to outsource it if that's not your particular skill set, but don't just give them free reign and say, oh, that looks good. Make sure that you're even, and it takes, and your marketer might have to tell you what your brand and your story is, because sometimes we're too close to it to be able to know. We're like, well, I'm just a regular farmer. I don't, you know, I haven't been having a grandpa on this land since 1822. So what kind of story do I have? And so that really helps to be able to have a third party, because I'm too close to my story a lot of times to know how to tell it.
That's interesting, Rosanna. I don't think I'm wrong here, but correct me if I am. I feel like years and years ago, I used to buy your eggs at the Community Mercantile in Lawrence. And weren't you the ones who did that awesome little strip of paper with typed or like on a computer and told a little story? And I'm telling you, I still remember some of those. So it would be, that one's hard to beat, but it, you know, I introduced to your family just through that, and those really stuck with me. So hard to beat that.
Having said that, that's not to say that I don't do any of the marketing, and that we too often can be deceived into thinking that marketing has to be something flashy and expensive.
Yeah.
We still do provide those little notes in the eggs, because it is our trademark, but that became not enough.
Okay.
That was not my, I needed more marketing than just that. But you're right, it's important that we have that we can be able to, even in the little things.
Yes. Yes. Well, great. Thanks. Donna, do you want to weigh in on this one?
I do. And just real quickly, I building relationships among farmers and our customers and the people that work with us and for us is really important. And I like the way Rosanna put it. You cannot give your brand over to someone, but when you hire those people, you set the parameters and the boundaries. And the social media person that I have, she's just wonderful. But what she did was, when she started doing the website and all the social media for us, she took the season out to ride with me on the market van. So she got a first-hand glance at what we did. So now when she upgrades or whatever, uploads or whatever she does, she has an idea of what we do and what our mission is. And she said that going on the market that season did a couple of things. First, it gave her a respect for farmers. She's a retired veteran. Gave her a new respect for farmers and what they do. Secondly, she was not tired. She did not have to take any sleep aids when she went to bed because she was too worn out. Thirdly, because she changed her eating habits, her A1C went significantly down. So she saw the immediate effects of being a part of this system and how healthy food can change your life. So I would suggest, if you're going to hire people, you let them ride with you, let them go with you, let them walk with you, let them see what you do, be transparent, and they can also help you tell your story. So, and you want to duplicate that story across the board. And back to Rick's comment, we want to teach them how to fish and not give them a fish. So we also want to incorporate community gardens and urban farming and all of those things that are changing our food system. And I certainly believe that we're coming back to the small farmer, where the small farmer helps to feed his community. So, and you guys are doing a wonderful job. Rosanna, Rick, everyone on this platform is doing something to help us rebuild, revamp, and restructure our food system so we can have healthy food for our people. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah. And thank you, Donna. Okay, from Manette Holton, she says, wonderful presenters. And then Rosanna, do you find yourself mentoring or advising others who want to become involved in opening their own meat locker or even an abattoir?
Mm.
I would say our farm always has had a open book policy. I don't know what you would say. We don't have trade secrets, and this is because we would be arrogant to presume so, because we were beginning farmers. We had to rely heavily on the farmers around us that were open with their knowledge, and some farmers were, some farmers weren't, and we really remembered that. And so if anybody has any questions, we'll share what we know. And don't be afraid to ask. Just reach out. I think our contact is in the Hoover, but we don't have trade secrets. And back to the competition thing, it's gonna be hard for somebody to be. I'll share, and no matter how close or far away you are from me, because that distance doesn't make a difference when we're talking about the local food shed.
Sorry. Great. Thank you so much. Okay, let's see. I don't see any more questions in the chat. So I was going to ask, maybe we're sort of getting down close to the end of our time here, but what, from all three of you, what has been maybe one of your biggest challenges in doing what you're doing? And then also maybe what's been one of your biggest successes, or maybe the thing that has been the most fun for you about what you're doing?
Well, I'll go first real quickly. My biggest challenge has been my family coming together, and my greatest reward has been my family coming together this year.
Great. There we go.
They're on board and they're working, and we're all working together. So yes, to keep the farm intact and to continue our parents' legacy of 50 years. So that's been a tremendous blessing this year.
That's incredible. Great. Rick?
One of the biggest challenges for me has been, and disappointments, is how quickly people get nasty on social media. Just make snide, unpleasant, hateful comments. We have ended up several months ago going with the one strike rule. It's like, here are the rules. You don't do these things. And if you step outside, and it's the people that are unpleasant that attack others for the way they grow things, how they price things. That's been incredibly disappointing to me. It's been a lot of challenge at times. The second great, or the really great thing, the thing that's made me the happiest, is that I've been thinking about food systems for a decade, and knowing that a digital hub was an important connector of all of that. And now I have the opportunity to build it out. And at the end of the day, if I can help make farmers prosperous, I think the mental health challenges that farmers face are largely related to the economy and them losing money on the farm. But if they could figure out a different and a new way to make money, and find the love for not only farming, but being able to carry on their farm through the successive generations, that to me is the greatest reward in all of this, is being able to help farmers make money.
That's great. Thank you. Rosanna, what about you?
Oh man, that's a big question. So I'll start with the challenge so we can end on something positive, maybe. I would say, other than, the typical challenges of running a small business, of trying to wear all the hats during the different stages of growth, that's typical. Year in, year out is always access to good people, to good farm hands, access to good quality labor. And that's using the wrong choice of words, I know, but as mentioned earlier in the day, we have a 4% to up to 7% across the state unemployment. And that's really good. And I'm really glad that Kansas has that. As we grow the local food segment, though, both skilled and it takes both skilled and unskilled labor. And you cannot, there's especially as you're a beginning business, there's some of your jobs that are going to be very difficult and not as nice as you grow and maybe can afford some labor saving devices or this or that. You're going to be doing things the long, hard, and the cheap way at first. So access to people who are willing to catch the dream with you is important. And we've been really blessed to be able to have the staff and the employees that we have there. And there's, always, it seems like trying to be able to retain them and be able to give them rewarding work in a rewarding work environment is important to us. Sometimes we achieve that goal, sometimes we don't. But the other challenges, really, I would say those are the most important. And the rewarding part, we're coming into our 20th year here. And so we've had some time to think about that a little bit more than others. And it's like, wow, part of that is just that not only did we survive 2020, which was hard on everybody from all aspects. So that feels pretty rewarding, but that we have survived 20 years. And every year, I mean, we're by no means feeling like we've arrived or anything like that. But every year has had its own unique set of challenges, and we recognize our vulnerability that we are at every year in different aspects. And that, if we don't always keep our game up, keep our humility down, then or keep our pride down and our game up, then we're going to it's those little things that rise up and catch you. So we're just really grateful that we've not only survived as a business, survived as a family, and had some really great customers, employees along for the ride, including KRC. I distinctively remember that was as right before we moved to our farm, we're like trying to figure out how in the world to farm differently and who do we reach out to. And KRC was the only recommendation that the county ag agent had. So we're like, how do we farm differently? Who do we reach out to if we want to farm? And so, yeah, they've been with us for the ride as well, and an important part of helping connect us to other farmers. That's been a part of our collective local food success for sure. And that was the rewarding part, is seeing consumers finally like see it and realize it and appreciate it in 2020. And they're like, wow, we really like what you're doing. It's like, yeah, we've been doing this for a while, but thanks for coming on board.
Yeah, Rosanna, I think that a lady, one of my growers said, did you realize that you were for all of these years, you were preparing yourself for such a time as this? And that, I think that speaks volumes, because if we would have been thinking about what we were doing now, we would not have even fathomed that we would have come through 2020 successfully and still surviving. So yeah, we've been prepared for this. So we're ready. We're ready.
Yeah, I should add that footnote. As a butcher, the history of my red meat butcher plant is we sort of quickly and unexpectedly found ourselves the owner of our local meat butchery. And, it was always nothing that we set out to do, and that kind of landed in our lap. And it's been an intense struggle for all the last 6 years that we've had it. Every year has been a challenge. And, some moments we were like, why did this happen to us? Why are we the butcher? And finally in 2020, we're like, wow, this is why we ended up with the butcher shop, because it was at that point where if we wouldn't have stepped up and took the reins on it, it was going to fold. And I was able to imagine what was my county, the surrounding 6 counties, what would have they been like if my butcher shop wouldn't have been there? I mean, it was always needed, but it was especially so. And that was very humbling. So that was pretty rewarding to realize this last year.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible. Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, does anyone else have any questions? We're about to the end of our time here, but we could probably take one more if anybody has a great one. Or if either, any of the three of you would like to, say any final words. I feel like everything that you've said has been very, very educational and inspirational. Fine. No, it's Friday afternoon and we're all, everybody's tired. We're getting lots of thanks in the chats. Well, we so thank you to our speakers for being here and sharing your time and wisdom and knowledge. It's just means so much to us. And also we want to thank everybody who's attended today. We really appreciate you coming and hope you had a great experience.